been asked for my opinion on Gene Okerlund, and I do want to touch on Gene Okerlund because me and Gene was part of the wrestling shows when I started watching wrestling back in 1984. Might have been 83 actually when I started watching wrestling. I remember the first shows I watched were All Star Wrestling and Stampede, which is local for me. Especially All Star. All Star was out of Vancouver and Stampede was out of Calgary, so we could watch that every week. And I remember Rocky De La Serra and Sonny Idol. I think it was one. Anyways, there were a lot of locals, and of course there was Mike Tenta who went on to become Earthquake. I remember Mike Tenta when he was when he went over to Japan and he was going to become a sumo. I remember they were interviewing him on local media, and basically in these phone interviews with local media, what it sounded like was it was a lot more difficult for Mike than he thought it was going to be, and he really wanted a way out. He really wanted to come home. Next thing I know, he's a pro wrestler, and I'm like, being a sumo was really, really difficult. And I don't think people realize that, sumo wrestling is a very, very difficult thing to get into, and it is much more physically demanding than one might think by looking at the shape that sumo wrestlers are in. But it was at around that time that he went over to WWE that I had already been a fan of WWE for a while. Now, the first match I ever watched and really cared about, was Tito Santana against Greg the Hammer Valentine inside a steel cage for the Intercontinental title. And that was when I realized the Intercontinental title kicked ass. Because Hulk Hogan came out and he put his hand to his ear and he body slammed people and he leg dropped people. But if you wanted a real match, it was the Intercontinental title, it was the match. Now, we fast forward 35 years later, and you've got Seth Rollins, who's a fantastic worker. Dean Ambrose, fantastic worker. These are the guys that are your Intercontinental guys. And then your world title belongs to Brock Lesnar. And your world champion, I don't care what they call it right now. I know it's Universal Champion, but it's World Championship. It's the WWF title. Just new name and all these new things. But the WWF champion is the guy who comes out, slams people, and puts his hand to his ear. And sometimes he's a bad guy, sometimes he's a good guy, but he's basically a sneering powerhouse. And it's not your match of the night. But man, that cage match won me over. Both of them were bleeding by the end of it. I fully believe that both of them were hurt by the end of it. Now, from an early age, I knew it was staged because my dad told me. My dad sat me down and said, yeah, this isn't real. If guys were really doing this, if they were really doing it to hurt each other, they're dead. Like, he was very clear with me, look, this is all staged, you need to understand. And I had a parent that actually didn't want me doing that stuff at school, so we went over to my friend's house and we had a basement that we wrestled in. And thankfully, my best friend, his mom made us a couple of dummies that we could wrestle with and not be dummies ourselves and wrestle with each other. So basically, it was just full-size, human-sized dummies. It was kind of fun, but yeah, that was when wrestling for me was at its peak, kind of in my interest of it. So for me, Mean Gene Okerlund was a big part of that in his interviews. But when he cracked up, and there were times where he wasn't supposed to, and he'd crack up, and it might be with Macho Man. Might be with Hulk. It might be something somebody says where they misspeak. Might be something somebody says which is just silly or stupid. And he'd start cracking up. And that to me was what made Mean Gene a great backstage interviewer. Now the funny thing to me with him was when he went to WCW, they made a big deal about it in WWE, and I never understood it because he was still a backstage interviewer. It's sort of like right now what you've got in WWE. One I would use an example of is Charlie Caruso. Now, Charlie Caruso has a fantastic look. She's a very good speaker. Seems to be very intelligent. But if she left tomorrow and went to Impact, it doesn't really change WWE's programming. They seem to have a ready-made well of people they can bring into these roles, which makes it hard because when you're an interviewer, you can be replaced at the drop of a hat. So it has to be a stressful job. It has to be a job where you're like, all right, I'm supposed to ask these questions. All right, I gotta be, because if I screw this up and they see it, then I'm out. And I'm out. So it has to be a stressful job. And I'm sure at the time when Mean Gene was there, um, he seemed to really get along with Hulk. He seemed to really get along with these guys, and he seemed to give a damn. And sometimes with interviewers, and where I kind of get lost when I'm watching wrestling is, it's sort of like when you're watching a movie and there's a bad actor. If somebody's an interviewer backstage, but they don't really care what they're doing. Like at the beginning, I got that impression with Jonathan Coachman. Coach didn't really care, and it was hard to watch him. And Michael Cole, when he was first a backstage interviewer, there were moments where I was like, he doesn't care. This is stupid. And it is really hard to get over that once you get that feeling. So where I try to explain this to people with wrestling is, it's not about reality. It really isn't. Like, we understand that all these moves, you can't really, do all these things for real without seriously injuring somebody, breaking somebody's legs, all this stuff. So we get that it's all staged. But the people on TV have to buy into it. And where I think WWE fails now compared to where it was all those years ago back in the 80s is that some of the wrestlers on TV don't buy into it. Or they'll come out, they'll run their lines, they'll do their little spot they're supposed to do, and they'll run out of the ring, and you don't buy any of it because you don't get the feeling their heart is into it. The other thing that's changed for me since then, and it's something that goes on a lot now, and I know with the internet we have a rage-based society. Wrestling fans are bad for this, and admittedly I've fallen into this too. So-and-so isn't getting pushed. This is stupid. So-and-so gets beat every week, and this is stupid. Well, wrestling's always had jobbers. The thing is, jobbers now, you don't actually call them jobbers. They just don't win. And you've always had them. A good example of the current WWE wrestlers, Tyler Breeze. Tyler Breeze is a good wrestler. Good guy. And if they decided to push him and put a title on him, I would be all for it. I think he's got a good character. I think he's a very good performer. And when I watch WWE live and Tyler comes out and wrestles a match, he's fantastic. He gets the crowd in the palm of his hand. He's very entertaining, very funny, and he seems like a genuinely good guy. But he's a jobber. He comes out, he does the job, which is lose, and then he goes backstage. And as a jobber, your role is to make the other guy look good, and he does. He always makes his opponent look good. And that's kind of their role. Now, a good example going back to the 80s is Barry Horowitz. Barry Horowitz lost every damn week. He lost every damn match to every damn wrestler he went in the ring with. It was constant. And Barry Horowitz, he'd come out and he'd pat himself on the back, and he'd put his fist in the air, and then the bell would ring, and about a minute and a half later, Barry Horowitz would lose. But if you go back and watch an old Barry Horowitz match, the guy can wrestle. He was a good wrestler. He had a decent look. He had a decent physique, which was big back then. Back then, it was all about being big and muscular and looking like Hercules, which is why one of them became named Hercules. And you had to have that. Barry Horowitz, by today's standards, would be a huge internet darling. Fans would love Horowitz. They'd chant for him. They would want him to come out to the ring. The example I would use that reminds me of Barry Horowitz, and I mean this as a compliment, is Ty Dillinger. Ty Dillinger has the crowd eating out of the palm of his hand. His 10 chants are amazing. And I've done the 10 chant when I watch him come out. But the way WWE books him, he's a jobber. He comes out, he's an enhancement talent. And that's why now that there's AEW coming out, which, there's a lot of hype about, because there's a lot of money behind this new company that's got Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks as kind of the guys behind it. And, guys like that are probably going to move, because why wouldn't they? They have a chance to be main eventers or mid-carders, at least win some matches, and WWE can replace them easily. If Zack Ryder, Tyler Breeze, the Ascension's another one. The Ascension can't win anything. They're the Mulkey brothers of the 2010s. The Mulkey brothers would come out to the ring in NWA, or later on WCW as it was known. I don't even think they lasted until it was WCW. The Mulkey brothers were, they were scrawny twins. I think they were twins. I don't know. They may have been, but they were skinny blonde guys who would come out to the ring. They looked kind of scrawny. And they'd come out to the ring and they'd just pose, and it was Mulkey brothers and their opponents. And then you'd hear Iron Man would start, And out would come the Legion of Doom, who were known as the Road Warriors at the time, and Iron Man by Black Sabbath was their theme song. And I'm telling you, as much as people loved the whole What a Rush thing in WWE, to me, Iron Man was their song. That was intimidating. They would come out to Iron Man, just that thumping beat would start. They'd come to the ring. They would destroy the Mulkey Brothers in about 10 seconds, slam them into each other, give them the Doomsday Device, 1, 2, 3, and back out of the ring. It was fantastic. By today's standards, the Mulkey Brothers would be called guys who don't get a chance. What's the point of having them there? It's enhancement talent. They're there to get guys over. And I think, in all honesty, some of the internet culture that exists has made it impossible for wrestling to work the way that it used to. You can't have jobbers because people get too attached to everybody. We get attached to these guys that lose every week, and we go, well, wait, why are they losing? Like, NXT will do its best to cultivate a wrestler and then bring him up. As an example, Velveteen Dream wasn't brought up in the most recent list of call-ups. But Lacey Evans and Nikki Cross were, and Lacey Evans hasn't won a title in NXT, and Nikki Cross has had chances she hasn't won. I don't think Nikki Cross is coming up to get pushed. I think Nikki Cross is coming up because they just need some new women to feed into the blender and see what comes out. They'll get their chance, but at the end of it, I don't think Nikki Cross or Lacey Evans are going to be championship material. That being said, I wouldn't have said Carmella was either. But people will point at this and go, well, there's an NXT jinx. Yeah, but there isn't. There really isn't. Ambrose has had the title. Seth had the title. Roman had the title. They all came through NXT. The Shield came through NXT. A lot of the stars in the company came through NXT. It's weird to me because people will point out certain wrestlers and say, oh, there's this jinx in place. There's this whole thing against NXT guys. No, it's just most of the wrestlers right now came through NXT. No, Ronda Rousey didn't and Brock Lesnar didn't because they didn't need NXT. Brock's wrestled before, and why the hell would you put Ronda in NXT? That's your money ticket, and they knew that was their meal ticket, so you put her on the main roster. But it's a fine line wrestling walks, and coming back to the Gene Okerlund thing, Okerlund was a throwback to the day of that we believed it. We believed what we saw on TV, and we bought it. So if WWE trucked out Papa Shango, we went, okay, I guess there's a Papa Shango in the ring. That's different. Okay. We didn't mock it so much. We didn't question it because there wasn't internet at the time. There wasn't this whole rage culture thing. It's so weird. It is so bizarre to me, the whole rage culture thing. And there are a lot of fans on the internet that want the show to conform to the way they want it. Now, I've said before I've stopped watching, and there are, I didn't watch Raw last week. I didn't watch it this week. I watched parts of SmackDown last week and this week. But I don't jump around on message boards and say, oh, they need to change this or I'm gone, because it's their show. They can do what they want with it. WWE, I think their product gets better when they have a challenge, when they have a competitor. And again, it harkens back to when the whole company's focus changed, which was when WCW started stealing and siphoning off wrestlers. So, the death of the Mean Gene Okerlund interviewing everybody backstage and everybody having the goofy characters thing, when that changed was when they started siphoning off wrestlers. And Diesel and Razor Ramon show up, but they can't be Diesel and Razor Ramon. So who are they? Their real names, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. And they still act like Diesel and Razor, but they use their real names. So even though they're still using that character, they're not at the same time. So Scott Hall gradually becomes himself. Kevin Nash gradually becomes himself. When they first came out, they were more the characters, and they became themselves as time went on. And what happens with that is you go from a situation where Mean Gene's interviewing characters to now he's interviewing real people. And it just changed the whole dynamic forever. And I think with WWE, I think they embraced that, and you saw guys like Stone Cold, The Rock, Mick Foley. They got over because they became themselves, but they were still that amped up character. Now, all these years after the death of WCW, we are now seeing a company where it feels like they're trying to amp up characters again. Let's go back. They're calling up Lars Sullivan, who's this big brute. Just big, evil brute. That's pretty much it. Nikki Cross, who's crazy. Entertaining, but crazy. Lacey Evans, who's a perfect lady, and she tells other women how they aren't ladies. They're hearkening back to the old 80s style characters. But fans aren't completely going to buy into that. Because, they'll say, well, look at what somebody's posting on Instagram. I think a good example of that would be Lana in WWE. She's Lana, right? And then on Total Divas, she's CJ. Yes, Lana technically, but she's CJ. She's got an American accent. She's clearly an American girl. And her personality is absolutely nothing like what you see on TV. It's a disconnect. It's a problem. So, I get asked about my opinion of Mean Gene. I think the passing of Mean Gene, combined with all of the other wrestlers that have gone, it further separates us from what wrestling once was. An era we can't go back to unless this all elite wrestling that's coming out in 2019 pushes WWE. If they start selling out arenas in cities that normally only WWE sells out, if they have a regular show on TV that starts pulling ratings comparable to Raw and SmackDown, WWE is going to have to innovate their product. Whether they have their own network or they don't, WWE would have to innovate their product, because a new company coming in with a new product, if they package it right, if they have the production values, and if they harken back just a little bit to what wrestling was, which from what I've seen of what Cody Rhodes has done since he left WWE, it seems like he's harkening back to what made wrestling great years and years ago. I think Mean Gene would approve. So there you go. I again, it's an uncomfortable topic for me when somebody's passed away to discuss it. I don't like to, for reasons people probably know from the Hockey Channel, yada yada yada. But he was he was probably the best backstage interviewer of them all, and yet at the same time it was in an era where everybody was characters, so he didn't really get into the hard hitting questions because that wasn't really the thing back then. It was more of just, okay, you're crazy. Why are you crazy? What are you doing? Oh, this is crazy. He'd be interviewing the sheep herders who became the bushwhackers, and then they just do the... Anyways, they were much more entertaining when they were the sheep herders. If you're old enough to remember bushwhackers and you never saw them as the sheep herders, boy, you missed out. When they were heels as the sheep herders, they were fantastic. They were amazing. And then they went to WWE and they did the Happy, and I'm like, who the hell are these guys? Oh, they're the Happy New Zealand. No! Bring me the sheep herders. When I heard the sheep herders were going to WWE, I freaked out. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And then they come out and I'm like, that's not the sheep herders. That's bushwhackers. No, what the hell? Yeah. But everybody bought it, and everybody bought all the WWE merchandise at the time, WWF at the time, of course, and that was my frustration at the time. But I didn't have an internet to complain about that too. And if the internet had existed back then, I guarantee you would have seen a huge backlash against the bushwhackers because of people who loved the sheep herders, because of what the sheep herders were. The greatest thing ever, and I don't remember if it was Butch or Luke. I think it was Luke, was on the apron, and the sheep herders are in control of the match. And there were 3 sheep herders at the time. There was the 2 of them, and there was the flag boy. I'm trying to remember the flag boy's name, and it escapes me. But they're in the ring, and the crowd starts the USA, USA, USA chants, of course, right? Because that's a given in a wrestling match. And he turns around to the crowd and goes, yeah, US bloody A. Silence. Killed it. And I was like, wow, he killed a USA chant. That is some masterful crowd work right there. That is masterful. And it never showed up, not once in WWE. All the years they were in WWE, they never turned heel. Didn't happen. They were always the good guys. And honestly, they were kind of jobbers. They didn't really win feuds. They didn't really win matches very often. But because there were jobbers at the bottom of the level, they could come out on Superstars or Main Event and smile for the crowd and hug the fans at ringside. And then they go in and beat up the WWE's version of the Mulkey Brothers. And they'd leave the ring and leave everybody happy. But when it came to a big match against somebody, whether it was the Legion of Doom or Demolition or British Bulldogs or whoever it was, they'd lose. And again, in today's day and age, people would say, oh, they're not getting a break. I do think there's some micromanagement of wrestling. I don't envy the guys who have to write this every week. I think the 50-50 booking is because people rage when the same guys lose every week. But the 50-50 booking means you never elevate anybody. So it's a catch-22. And I don't know that in today's day and age that a Mean Gene Okerlund would get over with the crowd. I really don't. It's sort of like when we look back at Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, the greatest tandem that ever worked in the booth. Absolutely, easily the greatest tandem that ever worked at a WWE booth. Would they work now? I don't know. I don't know. With the way the internet is, with all the internet rage, you go back and watch old matches with them calling it, and you listen to some of the things Bobby Heenan says at ringside, there's no way social media would let Bobby Heenan get away with some of that stuff that he says. He said some stuff that, man, I would laugh pretty hard at. I still laugh pretty hard when I hear some of it now, but there's no way he would have got away with it. And Bobby Heenan was one of the nicest guys on planet Earth, as spoken by anybody you talk to him. But, again, it's really changed. Dramatically changed. I do recommend, looking up any and all Gene Okerlund interviews where he cracks up. It is the greatest. Because once he's gone, he's gone. And what he'll do is he'll kind of hide behind the wrestler while he's holding up the microphone, and you might see him shaking, and you might see his head down. It's great stuff. So there you go. A little bit of a documentary, a little bit of a look at wrestling where it was, where it is, and I don't know where it goes from here. Because again, the internet's not going away. Us as fans feeling like we have a better opinion of what to do with wrestlers than they do isn't going to go away. And so for the guys booking it, I can't think that it's much fun. Because there's always somebody on the internet who's ready to tell them that they know better than they do how to get wrestlers over, even though we likely don't have any idea. And that's the truth. I would love, through the hockey channel, people are always like, would you want to be a coach of a hockey team? And my answer is no. I don't want that pressure. But if somebody came to me and said, would you like to book WWE for a month? Yes. Absolutely yes. Yes. I would love that. Give me a month of running Raw or SmackDown or 205 Live. I don't care. Give me a month. Yes. So that's the weird thing is that, my channel with hockey is up to 71,000 subscribers as of tonight. This one's at 5,000. And yet, if I had a choice, I would love to put together a wrestling event. I would love to hire wrestlers. I would love to book the event. I would love to do everything involved with it. But hockey? Not really. No, I would love to sit and talk hockey with everybody on the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast team and all that. I have no interest in coaching or being a manager or any of that. Wrestling? Absolutely. Yeah. You give me the 20 wrestlers WWE won't push. You send them to me. I will book them all matches. I would have no problem figuring out you're feuding with that guy, you're feuding with her, and here's what we're going to do during the match. You're going to do a run-in, and then you're going to, I would have the whole thing all figured out, and it would be the most unpredictable show that anybody had ever seen. Because I've watched it for, 35 years. So I think yes, I could probably do that. But, again, I'm on the internet, so we all think we can do that. There you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, I'll talk to you again soon.